Today on Woodworking with Wes, we have a new addition to the shop. It's a router sled. A router sled is something you may not use a lot in your shop, but when you need one, nothing else replaces it. Instead of spending hundreds of dollars, I'm going to show you how to build one with just a single sheet of plywood. To get started on our saw sled, the first thing we're going to build is the rails for both sides. I have cut my piece of plywood to the length of my assembly table, which is what we're going to use as the base of our saw sled. Now, the plywood that I purchased was a 9-ply white birch. I paid $60 for it at my supplier, but remember, we can build this saw sled out of only one sheet. So the cost of the saw sled wood is only going to be $60, at least for me. Depends on where you buy your piece of plywood. We're going to cut a 6-inch strip, a 4-inch strip, and a 3 1/4-inch strip out of this piece, and this will make one side of one leg of our sled, one rail. There's the right word. One rail of our saw sled. So let's set up and get going. Glasses so we can see, and we'll start with our 6-inch piece. We have a combination blade in our saw. Turn on our dust collector and cut. Okay, we start off by nailing our 3 1/4 and our 4-inch strip in a right angle, just like this. We're going to put a little glue, use 1.5" 18-gauge brads. It'll give us a bead of glue down our piece here. This is a little 3 1/2-inch spacer that's going to help hold my piece of wood as I nail along here, because it's awfully hard to hold a 7-foot piece of wood. And we're going to line it up flush along the bottom and flush with the ends, like I say, to make a right angle. We'll go down along here and give us some nails to tack it into place first. Then we'll go through and put some extra nails into it, so our nails and glue will hold all that we need. Okay, just like that, there's our right angle. Okay, now we want to make sure that we maintain that right angle perfectly square. So I made some little blocks that are going to fit in just like this. We'll nail them from the inside and from the bottom, and that will help maintain our perfect right angle. We're going to put a little glue. Before I do that, I'm going to actually make a little mark, because I'd like to have them evenly spaced. I'm going to make them at 24 inches in from the end. We'll just give ourselves a couple of 24-inch marks there, and the same on the back side. These little glue blocks could be placed anywhere. I just kind of like them to be evenly spaced. Okay, and we'll put one at the end, on each end, and then one at our 24-inch mark. Just a little glue on the side and the face. Slide it into place flush with the end. Sorry, my hands are in the way, but I'll show you when I get it all nailed in what it looks like. Two nails on the inside, and just like that, there's our little spacer squaring block. I won't call it a spacer block, it's a squaring block. And we'll do the same thing, just like this, all the rest of the way down for all 4 pieces. Okay, with our right angle nailed together, I have taken my handheld trim router and put an 1/8 inch round over on the top of the upright piece of our right angle. I'm going to go through now and just sand that so that it's clean. And I'm going to show you in a minute why I'm doing that. But we're going to go through and sand that. We're also going to go through and break the edges of our other pieces so we don't have any sharp edges anywhere. But we'll go ahead and sand everything, and then I'm going to show you why. With our right angle all put together and sanding all done, it's time to wax the top of our rail. This is where our actual router sled will slide along. And so we wax this down really good so that it will slide nice and evenly. Now I'm just using tree wax. There are different brands, and I think the brand I have is Minwax, Tree Wax? No, True Wax, Tree Wax. Okay, anyway, different brands. Now, remember we cut a 4-inch piece and a 6-inch piece. Our 6-inch piece has also been routed and waxed. What that allows us to do is work on different levels. So let me show you how this works. This piece will go along the edge of our table. It will be clamped to our table like that. If we have a thick piece of wood that and a router sled is used for flattening stock. We're going to show you that in a future video. I got a beautiful tree round that we're going to be using, and that's why we're building it. But if we have a thicker piece, we need to be up a little higher, and so I made this as a secondary level to put the sled on. We won't attach this piece unless we're doing a thick piece, and then we'll just screw it from the back side with some 1¼ screws. But there we are. This is our rail to our router sled, and we have one for the other side. So there's one on both sides, and by putting them on and taking a measurement, that will determine the size of the sled part, which is what we build next. We now have our rails clamped to our assembly table. We had to do that first so that we could determine the size of our sled. Measuring across the top of our rails will tell us what size the actual sled part of our router sled will be. One of the things that we needed in order to make the router sled is we needed to have a plunge router, and I didn't have one. I went to Amazon, I bought a DeWalt plunge router with a 2¼ horsepower motor. That will give us all of the power that we need to have. We also needed to have a special flattening bit. Now this bit will fit down and it will go across the top of our material and it will flatten. It has 2 carbide heads on each side, and they're 4-sided heads, so they can be loosened and turned as they dull. This is a very nice bit, and this is also available on Amazon. And we'll provide a link to both of those things. Let's open up our router and take a look. Brand new. I love brand new tools. Okay. Just like Christmas, brand new tools. Okay. I've never had a plunge router before. I've used them many times in the shops that I've worked at, but I've never actually had one of my own. Here's our tools, our cord, okay. This is the collar that allows you to plunge. Let's see if we can show you how that works. I guess I need, oh, there it is. I said that. Okay, this collar will slide up and down. See how that slides up and down? That allows us to adjust the height of the router bit itself compared to the plate that is at the bottom of the router. So as we're working our way across and we need to go down a little bit more to take off some more material, we just go down, we set the stop. I guess that's, we're gonna have to, oh, there's the stop here, over here. Here's the stop. Okay, so we push down, set the stop, do some more, and we just work our way down until we have flattened our whole thing. This is the plunge base. And here, here is our actual brand new router. And it has a standard base on it. So this is this handles here, this is the standard base that you would use if you're not using the plunge base. Because we're going to be doing our router sled with this, we're going to be using the plunge base. Quick release collars, like that. Allow us to take the collar off and on. Back on, snap lock. Very nice. Okay, let's use these pieces in order to design our sled, because we're going to have to move this across in the sled part itself. Let's go there. We'll figure that out. Well, we've completed the sled portion. You can see how the router slides back and forth. Let's go through and show you exactly what I did in order to build the sled. Now, first off, let's look at the base of the router. The router base has a flat side to it, and it's 5.5 inches across. The center hole where the router bit comes through is off center. It's centered in the circle, but we have the flat edge. All right, let's show you what I did in the construction of the sled portion. Let's turn it over and start at the bottom. The first thing I did was to cut a piece of plywood to 5.5 inches wide. That is the same width of the router bottom itself. Okay, remember we were off center. I cut a slot that is the size of the flattening bit that we're going to be using, actually a little bit bigger than the flattening bit, and I centered it based upon the off center of our base piece on our router. So this side is smaller than this size, but it lines up perfectly with that. I went ahead and I just put a little round over on it and make it a little softer. I attached a 1-inch block on both ends. What I did to do that is I measured the overall width of my rail to rail, outside of rail to outside of rail, and added 2 inches, and then put a 1-inch block so that when I turned it over, it fit on my rails so that it would slide back and forth on my rails. I put a corresponding 1-inch block as a stop on the router itself. I put that on both ends. And then I added sides for guides to the router. So when you put the router in, and I waxed it all up so it slides nice and easy. So when I put the router in, it slides back and forth across the sled portion, and then the sled portion will slide on the rails as I work across the top of whatever I'm flattening. And that's how a router sled works. You have a sled and a router, and you use that to flatten your stock. And there you go. A router sled made with 1 sheet of plywood for hundreds less than your factory models. Well, I hope you enjoyed our video on building a router sled out of just 1 single sheet of plywood. I went ahead and put in the first project that we're going to be using our router sled for. It was thick enough that I had to add those 6-inch pieces that I talked about that we cut out right from the very beginning. This is a hickory tree round, and it was cut from a tree that was high enough up that the tree had started to branch and now has 4 centers. It's going to be a cool, I think we're going to make a coffee table out of it. That's going to be a neat video, and we're going to see you then on Woodworking with Wes.